All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Christie Yee. I'm Euclid's Practice Management and Implementation Specialist. I want to thank everybody for joining part 2 of our webinar series, Implementing Myopia Management in Your Practice. During our previous webinar, Dr. Kading and I discussed the importance of really defining your myopia management program and doing some goal setting and really setting timelines to those goals. We discussed a little bit about pricing strategy, office policies, and we touched a little bit on lens care and patient instructions. If you missed this, we're going to post a link for you to watch at the very end. And I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. We are going to have time at the end to answer questions. So as you have questions, make certain you enter those into the chat box. We're going to get to as many of those as we possibly can. So tonight we're going to discuss the process of the myopia management examination. We're going to touch on how you should do follow-ups, what that schedule should look like, what you should be looking for during those follow-up appointments, and when those visits should actually occur. We're also going to discuss how to become more efficient by utilizing your staff to their fullest potential. This is something super near and dear to my heart because as a non-OD fitter, I am the staff. And you'd be surprised at what we can do and what we can help you with in your office, given the proper opportunity and training. I met Dr. Mai in California, and when we were talking, this was something that I know he was super passionate about as well. So when I was really designing this 3-part series, I wanted to make certain we could bring him on to talk to you guys about just the opportunities that your staff can really help you with. So everyone, I'm super excited to introduce you guys to Dr. Mai. He is one of the co-founders of Insight Vision Optometry in Costa Mesa, California. This is like a super amazing practice that specializes specifically in myopia management, scleral lenses, and vision therapy. Those are like my 3 favorite things. Dr. Mai is also a Vision Source administrator, and he's also the director of myopia management services for Treehouse Eyes. And before we get started, I want to take a second to really just talk about Treehouse Eyes. So one of the cool things about Euclid is that we really want to help you be successful. So we offer implementation services. So if you're just getting started and you need a little bit of general guidance, I'm here for you. We'll do one-on-one consultations, and I can help you from anything like fitting help to discussing office policy or staff training. But if you're already like dabbling in the myopia management space and you're like, man, I just really want to take my practice to the next level, or maybe you're just like all in and you're like, I just want to be like a specialty practice for myopia management, Treehouse Eyes could be a really amazing partner to help you reach your goals. And Dr. Mai is going to probably do a way better job of describing Treehouse than I can. So I'm going to let him actually go ahead and just talk about it for a minute.
Great, yeah. Just like you mentioned, I am in private practice in Southern California. Definitely do a lot of myopia management, especially contact lenses. My personal schedule is I don't see any primary care patients, and I'm booked up for the next 2-3 months. Just all myopia patients stacked on top of each other, and or scleral patients stacked on top of each other. That's my personal schedule. I've done over 1,000 easily myopia management, orthokeratology cases. And so I've seen it all. Any questions you've had about what patients asked you before and after the fitting, I've heard and seen it all. And I also work with Treehouse Eyes as well. We have over 70 locations right now, and I talk to dozens and dozens of doctors every week about how to do myopia management in their practices, what questions they have in terms of implementation. So Treehouse Eyes, in a nutshell, is a company that we specialize in. Our mission is giving patients and kids better vision for life. That's our mission statement. And how we do that is we help doctors, especially across the country, implement a strong myopia management program in their office. We're training your staff, training the doctors, helping with the marketing, everything all in above to install a basically world-class myopia management practice in your office without you doing much of the thinking and direction yourself. We'll take it and do the branding and marketing and help you out. And so that's Treehouse Eyes in a nutshell. And again, happy to be here talking to you, Christy. I'm excited to talk about how staff can be involved with the whole process and any other questions you guys might have.
Yeah. So let's start with staff, especially like leveraging your staff. Some of the most successful practices that I work with and I talk to are really ingenious at utilizing their staff. It allows like the doctor to stay focused on like revenue generating exam work that really requires like that OD skill set. So can you like in your practice describe the role of your myopia management champion or counselor and just exactly how that program works for you in your practice?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. So we all know that the patients spend more time with the staff than with the doctor, and for good reason. The doctor is often a bottleneck. So the more and more you can train your staff, the better. One thing I hear from other doctors, they say having well-trained staff is of course important to me, but they don't actually. And I ask them, okay, so how often do you guys meet? How often do you have a myopia meeting with your staff? How often are you educating your staff on the process and procedures and what you do? And then they kind of look at me, oh, we haven't had a team meeting in months, like once a quarter, once a year, we have a staff meeting. And
Right.
that practice already, they've already lost the game. They're never going to implement a world-class myopia practice because they haven't set the time aside. So one of my favorite quotes is, "Don't tell me your priorities, show me your calendar." If it's not on your calendar, to me, it's not your priority, right? And
Yeah.
so first of all, you start there, have a staff training sessions, have it on the calendar. As far as the role of the myopia manager, counselor, or treatment coordinator, however you want to call them, champion, they essentially do everything. They can ideally they can obviously do anything in the exam room: visual acuities, entrance testing, topographies, even refraction, slit lamp exam. They can take fluorescein patterns. They can do everything a doctor does, in my opinion. The doctor should be not a data collector. That's just my opinion. That certainly you can collect data initially when you are getting started, because you yourself should learn how to do it before you delegate. But I think the role of if you want to have a world-class program, is that the counselor can essentially, even without a doctor there, essentially the doctor is just there to just sign on the dotted line of the prescription, but they should be able to just do everything. They should be able to fit lenses. They should be able to take fluorescein patterns. They should be able to take topographies, and they should be able to talk about the program, the follow-ups, how effective it is, what you do at the end of the night, how much you sleep, things like that. That's what the myopia counselor should be for. And you should train them at the level of being a doctor.
And how long do you think it's taken you to foster your staff to be at that level?
It is constantly ongoing. We meet every week for at least an hour and a half, where we talk about how to do things like topographies, how to analyze fluorescein patterns, how to do slit lamp, how to actually use a slit lamp, how to add fluorescein pattern and find SBK and things like that. My staff knows how to do all those things. All of us work together, and we're constantly training every week. And then we have new staff come in. We have turnover. We have things that happen, especially post-COVID. People sometimes shuffle around. But what doesn't change is the system that you have in place. And the system that we have in place is basically constant mentorship every week that's scheduled and booked out. And we have meetings that we have at least every week as well, to talk about how the myopia program is going. Who should we call and ask them where they are, if they're ready to sign up or not? Who have we forgotten to recall because they said they were going to come back in 3 months for a follow-up visit, but we haven't seen them in the last 9 months.
Yeah.
And unless you have those meetings, that also falls by the wayside.
Yeah, I love it. And I can only speak to like myself, but I feel like when your doctor and like the people that you work with invest in you, like with education and like that training piece, there's better job satisfaction. You've given me not just a job, but like a career when you have that specialized skill set. I fit scleral lenses, much like your staff. I do all parts of the fitting process. Our doctors here in Minnesota are, like, at least at my practice, not really involved in the contact lens fitting process much at all. They just, again, it's a double check. And so, having that special skill set that, there's some optometrists that don't have, there's some satisfaction in there, and so I guess I would just really encourage you, if you guys are not already utilizing some sort of myopia management counselor and you're doing myopia management, this is something that you probably should look into. If NCLE certification isn't something that's required in your state, maybe encourage your team to get that NCLE certification. If it's already required, maybe encourage them to get an advanced certification, because there just really is a better sense of job satisfaction that comes with that specialized training. One of my favorite parts of the job was actually just like when Dr. Ansel would see something in the chair that was maybe not an everyday thing. He's like, come over here and take a look at this. I want to show you pseudoexfoliation, so, like I got to do like a gonioscopy with him. So it's just, you really learn from your optometrist, and just your skill set's constantly growing. And honestly, I think like the job turnover is actually probably lower the more you invest in your staff, in your team, when they feel like they're involved in the process. It's greater satisfaction. So I really just appreciate that mindset.
Yeah,
So
core things about every human is we strive for growth, and we strive for it, and we have a yearning to learn, and we have a curiosity for it. And so having set time where you actually do it, not just say it, but you actually book it on the calendar where there's no patience, we are going to work on getting better, then that's to me the difference between practice of dabbling and a practice that wants to be world class.
Exactly. And then do you guys talk about the actual success of the business too? Do you incorporate your team in the actual overall like business growth, like how you guys are meeting goals and things like that?
Yes, we do. So I don't want to get into the weeds of it too much, but one of the best books I've ever read in my life is called Traction by Gino Wickman. And it's a program called the EOS program, basically. And you have scorecards and metrics that you show. And at our office, we're pretty open about it. We've even shared our P&L with the staff as well.
Yep.
Which has been kind of helpful for us because the staff assumes our gross revenue is our net. And there's a big difference. And
there is a big difference.
By showing them that, honestly, it made us seem more human.
Yeah.
So anyways, that was very helpful for us. That's somewhat controversial. Not everyone's going to do that, but at least we did it, and it was very successful for us. But yeah, by having the goals and we post them, we have our meetings. We're posting scorecards and goals and things like that. We're very open about where we want to go, and if you don't measure it, it doesn't get managed. So that's been a big part of how we do things.
Awesome. And again, just with the conversations that I've had with other practices, the practices that are most successful in myopia management are taking that exact same approach. They're talking to their team about where they are, where they want to be, and what the plan is for next year. So they really benchmark that and talk about it at their meetings.
Yep, exactly. It's like, let's say we're coming up with a new year, right? And so everyone's going to have their New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people will say, well, I'm going to lose weight, and one of the first things you should do if you want to lose weight, you got to measure yourself. You got to weigh yourself, right?
Yep.
And so if you say, I'm going to weigh myself every week, no matter what, the fact that you just did that, you did nothing else. All you changed was that you weighed yourself every week or even every day. That by itself will drive your behavior.
Yep. It's just that smidge of accountability.
Yes, exactly. Especially if you do it weekly. There's something about that weekly thing. I always say there's a reason why church meets once a week. There's something about that cadence of once a week that improves accountability, and that's kind of in human nature, that's embedded in our habits. And so I think a weekly check-in is a good cadence for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's actually talk about your exam process a little bit. So you've got a child in your chair that's been referred to you that you think is going to be a great candidate for myopia management. Now, I'm assuming they've already been referred to you for some sort of myopia intervention. Are they coming from outside your practice, or do you have other doctors in your practice that are referring to you?
Yeah, right now, I need to pull the report, which we love doing reports, but I think right now 65% of our patients at our practice are referred by another doctor.
Okay.
So it's not a Google ad, it's not a website visit. It's another doctor, pediatrician, someone that saw this patient and says, hey, they probably need myopia management, which is the best type of patient because the vast majority of referral, when you discuss the program with them, they move forward, at least 80-90%.
Yeah.
The ones that kind of kick the tires and find it on Google, they're more hit or miss.
Yep.
But right now, the majority are referred by another provider. So
you probably don't have to really introduce the concepts of myopia management to your patients. They kind of know why they're there.
We still do all the time. Oh yeah, so we do regular eye exams.
Okay.
My schedule is not. I'm one of 4 doctors at our office. My schedule is 0 regular eye exams routine, but yeah, we self-refer all the time as well. And in terms of when I talk to doctors trying to get their myopia management started from the ground, if they're a regular primary care office, we start there first. We start with the patient in the chair, and then we can we educate them. And then they end up signing up for myopia management once they're educated. The number one reason why patients don't sign up for myopia management is not because of price. It's because they never heard about it before. So you have to start the education process really early. Yep.
And do you try to do essentially like a myopia management consultation at the end of an exam, or are you breaking that out into like a separate consultation?
Good question. Very good question. This is one of the defining characteristics between a dabbler and a doer. So let me tell you how a dabbler does it. A dabbler might say, oh, kid's myopic. Oh my gosh, I need to tell them that they should do myopia management. And then the mom has no idea that this conversation is going to happen. She came in because little Johnny failed the school screening and she thought she just wanted a pair of glasses. It's like, let's say you walked into a car dealership and you're looking for like a Toyota, but then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I know you came in for a Toyota, but you really need this Lamborghini. Yeah. Then you kind of off-putting, right? And
Yep.
so basically, you should always address a chief complaint. If chief complaint is not myopia management, it's a hard thing that you're recommending. So basically, what I do at the end of the exam would be like, hey, little Johnny has myopia, and he's climbed the adopter in the last year. I will give him the glasses, basically what you asked for, whatever he asked for. Whatever they came in asking for, if he can't see far away, I'm going to give you something to help him see far away better. Done. Chief complaint addressed. But then I'll do something on the side. By the way, I'm a little bit concerned that his vision is climbing a adopter in a year. There are things that we can do to potentially slow down the progression of that. I'd love to see him back when he picks up his glasses to do some more testing, and we can talk about strategies we can do to stop it from getting worse. How's that sound? And the parent says, 89% of the time, sure, let's do it. And then at that conversation, now they've come in. Chief complaint is, I'm here to talk to you about what we can do to stop their giant's eyes from getting worse. I've also sent them some brochures, some information, some YouTube videos, an ebook I've written before that meeting, so they can kind of do some pre-work. And then all of a sudden they go, oh yeah, I've already heard about orthokeratology, atropine, multifocals, glasses, all these things. It's not hearing it for the first time. So when we have the discussion, we're talking more about what kind of treatment we're going to do, not if we're going to do it or not.
Yeah. So do you find that there's like a sweet spot from the time you do the exam to the time you hold a consultation? Is there a time frame that's like a sweet spot for you where like I want to get them back within this certain period of time for like the best chance of success?
Great question. So I'd say the amount of time doesn't matter. It's more about how much education they've had beforehand. Basically, the more educated the parent is, then they're more likely to do it. So usually we just have them come back when they're picking up the glasses. So usually that's like in a couple. Yeah, just because it works logistically, it works out between the pickup time for the glasses, anyways. So we try to kill two birds with one stone. They're coming back to pick up the glasses. Might as well talk about myopia management as well.
Yeah. And so like that was actually really similar to how we were doing things at my old practice. We started off the dabbler way where at the end of an exam, one of my partners would come and get me and they're like, hey, we've got a kid in exam lane 3 that would be a really great myopia management candidate. And you want to come and talk to them about the lens options. And so we're like running through and I'd be like, oh, and by the way, it's like $2,000 and not covered by insurance. And people were like, check, please, I'll just take my glasses prescription and go to the optical. And so our success rate was really low. It was probably like, I don't know, right around 49%. I mean, it was pretty low. And, like bottom line numbers, even if you're doing a couple Ortho-K fittings a month, you're making thousands of dollars in extra income. And so, like my team was like, wow, look at you go. And I'm like, yeah, and 50% of my kids are still getting worse. Like, this is not to be celebrated. Like, we could do better, And so again, we had some conversations and like Dr. Ansel was like, well, he's like, when we have like a suspicious like optic nerve and I want to do like some testing for glaucoma, I don't walk in and say, I'm concerned you have glaucoma. I'm going to need $2,000 to do an OCT in a Humphrey visual field. He's like, basically, I outline my concerns and then we schedule them a follow-up visit to do these things and to talk about what those next steps are. And I was like, you're right. This is, we should just treat this like we do any other eye condition. And so that's when we started actually doing the consultations separate. We'd book those exactly at 2 weeks, which kind of coincided with like if they needed to come back to pick anything up, that seemed to be a good time frame. And we changed our success rate, our capture rate from, like I said, that really low, like 49%, almost to 85% just by doing a separate exam and really like spacing that out. And then to your point, we had a handout and it wasn't a very comprehensive handout, but just something that really outlined like the diseases that were associated with higher degrees of myopia, and then the 3 modalities that we use to address progressive myopia in office. And we found that when we were doing those consultations, after they had just that little bit of information, the consultations were faster. Parents had more pointed and direct questions. So like I wasn't wasting a lot of time in a consultation answering like really not stupid questions, but just questions that, basically my little handout had already answered for them. And so it was a much more refined system. But going back to your handout and all the the data that you give them, if one of our listeners was wanting to create their own, are there certain points that you feel like should be on their handout?
Yes. So I'd say a few points is, first of all, outlining the problem, first of all. So, unless there's one of my favorite sayings is that the inconvenience of the solution needs to outweigh the problem. So the solution is inconvenient. So it's coming back, extra testing, got to pay money, all this stuff. And so you have to start with the why, right? Which is, one of my favorite books, Start with the Why. And the why has to be, myopia is a problem. It leads to problems when we let it progress. And we can prevent it from getting worse. And so in a nutshell, your brochure should say those type of things. And so, for instance, progressive myopia, we know, of course, is the visual consequence, but there's also the health consequences as well that are associated with high levels of myopia. And not even talking about the social sides of things. And so I would outline those in your brochures and your education, and be upfront about it. One thing that we talk about too is I always say you're praised in public for what you do privately. So like a lot of our patients sign up. Why? Is because I talked to mom 5 years ago, and 5 years ago her kid was 1 year old. And I said, hey, by the way, I'm doing her eye exam. And I'll say, hey, mom's a -6, -7, whatever. And I'll say, hey, mom, what's great is that, at the end of her exam, we'll prescribe her new glasses. I'll say, the good thing is that you and people like me, because I'm also a high myope, we don't need to exist anymore. There are things we can do to stop little Johnny's eyes from getting worse. And then she goes, wow, like what? Oh, there's like special contacts and special eye drops. And I leave it at that. I don't get into the weeds of it. And she goes, wow, so that means like we can do things to stop little Johnny? But yes. And of course, I talk about even the importance of outdoor activity to prevent the incidence of myopia in general as well. And so I'm educating the patients even before the kids are myopic, or even mom is pregnant. She doesn't even have a kid yet. I'll tell her. If she's not even pregnant yet, I'll tell her. And she's just a -6. Or I tell grandma who's -5, who might know someone. And so I'm telling everyone. And so if you're telling everyone, then you're doing exactly what the dentists and orthodontists are doing, where they're saying like, hey, your kid someday is gonna need braces. It's not like, if or when. It's like, by the way, you will probably need braces 7 years from now. So the work is done years in advance sometimes.
Yeah. So when you're doing the actual consultation, like what data are you collecting? Are you doing any additional like examinations, scans, or asking questions that you normally wouldn't during more of like a routine exam?
Yeah. So during the consultation, we are essentially building the case for why we need to treat myopia management. So the first thing we do is collect a lot of risk factors. Both parents are myopic. I might even measure their prescription if they have a pair of glasses, and I'll find out that they're like a -9, and then wow, that's definitely a risk factor for little Johnny, because I'm very curious where the parents are. I'll ask for how much outdoor activity. Ask for if they have glasses, how old were they when they had their first pair of glasses? Because the earlier they develop myopia, the higher the levels of myopia tend to happen, right? And so I'm collecting all these risk factors. Afterwards, we're doing the only thing different usually from a primary care exam would be taking corneal topographies and axial length measurements. And our core conversation is usually about the axial length. And we plot it in terms of where it is now and where we want it to be, and where it is in terms of what is normal for their age. And so that type of data is what we're showing them afterwards in doing the consultations. And after we show them all the results, then we recommend what would work for their kid. Is it going to be an atropine? Is it going to be orthokeratology? What it's going to be? And then we schedule the follow-up visits afterwards.
Gotcha. And how long is your typical consultation? And do you do the whole consultation, or is your myopia management champion involved in that somehow?
Yeah, so my staff does all the data collection. They're doing topography, they're doing axial length measurements, visual acuities. And I'm there just to chat. And normally my discussion, it depends on the mom. We profile this at Triage Eyes, and we've got certain types of moms that we have in our, but I'd say my discussion is usually 15 to 20 minutes or so.
Okay.
But I might book half an hour in terms of just the whole time, just in case, because I'm testing back and forth. And I'll hand it off to my staff. So some parents, they only need like 5-10 minutes. Some moms need like an hour, right? But I have to cut them off. But yeah, that's usually the amount of time it takes.
Okay. And then one of the questions that I get asked a lot, specifically with the orthokeratology, is how old should the children be? Or maybe the better way to phrase that is, how young can I fit a child in orthokeratology? And so from Euclid, there is no age range. So it is really on the provider to choose what age the child is appropriate, or the adult, is appropriate. And so for me, and again, like I go back to like my old like clinical fitting, and um, we had two pediatric ophthalmologists that got referred a lot of like congenital cataracts. And so we have infants that would be referred to the contact lens department at about 8 weeks of age. And so for me, it is very common for me to be putting a plus 22 diopter contact lens in an 8-week-old child. And then really, obviously mom and dad are involved in this process with the insertion and removal, and that lens care and hygiene aspects of it. And so when I started doing more myopia management, for me, the benchmarks were really like, is this in the best interest of the child? Do the parents have the competency to insert and remove and maintain the hygienic conditions of the lens? And does the child have a disposition that's going to tolerate mom and dad inserting and removing those lenses at home? And as long as they met those benchmarks, I was like, let's do it. So I think like the youngest child that I have fit in orthokeratology is about 5.5, I think. And she was already like a minus 250. You could already tell that this was just headed for, a really extreme case of myopia. We wanted to do, whatever we could to try to slow that train down. But I'm just curious, like what your thoughts are. Do you at the clinic, do you have like some hard rules on, like when you'll start or when you'll consider contact lenses, and what does that look like at your practice?
Yeah, very similar to you. My youngest is also 5. So great that we both have the same youngest. I was wondering what you were going to say on that. So yeah, and of course the parents were on board. The parents came in asking for it, honestly, for that one. I would say just in general, in terms of like there's a bell curve, right? Usually our cutoff is not cutoff, but usually the ones that are younger than 8 years old, like 7, 6, 5, usually they're not in contacts yet. They're not. Of course we've done it. We've done 5, 6, 7 year olds all the time, but usually less likely. And then 8 is a great age to start. They do really well. The 9, 10 year olds will do amazing. But I find that that's usually kind of a tipping point in terms of like maturity, and the parents are fine with it. And that's what I've seen in all the cases I've done. But yeah, just going back to what you're saying, parents have to be mature. Kid has to be mature. We always train the kid, not the parents, on how to do the insertion removal. In fact, pro tip, kick the parents out, because the parents just make them. Parents are terrible. Parents, they ruin everything.
Open your eye wider.
They're like sitting next to the kid. They like yell at their son for like an hour. I'm like, oh no, you need to just get out.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Yeah. So I train my staff. What I do is I help the staff. At first I try to have the staff tell the parent to stay out. And my staff, they're really nice. A lot of them are people pleasers, which is great, right? But they felt like uncomfortably like, hey, can you get out? And so, so what I do is I help them out. So I hand them off to the staff, and I say, hey, Sarah's gonna help you take the lens out. And I'll turn to the mom, hey mom, I've done this like thousands of times. Like, just trust me on this. Like, the kids do better 99.9% of the time if the parent just stays away. Are you okay if you kind of just watch from afar, and we'll tell you everything afterwards? And 99% of the time mom goes, okay, fine, sure.
Yeah.
And then and then it goes way better. And so kick the parents out.
For those of you that's listening, being staff, I appreciate this mentality so much. I have tried gently a few times to be like, like this is going to take like probably 45 minutes. If you just want to have a seat in the lobby, you can have like a glass of water or a cup of coffee, and we'll just come get you when this is over. But having it come from the doctor, it means so much more than coming from me. So again, if you can kick them out, that just relieves a lot of like pressure on the child.
Exactly. This next part is somewhat controversial, as I want to talk about real fast. Is that, well, first of all, you're right. The doctor needs to save the staff sometimes, because for whatever reason, the parents are going to listen to the doctor more than the staff. Sometimes they, for whatever reason, they don't act the same way or act properly to your receptionist and your techs as they do the doctors, which is a long conversation about human nature. But anyways, one thing that we do is we actually will quote the price too real fast. So let's say I'm handing off to my myopia management counselor. Instead of having her talk about the price, I'll bring it up very casually, literally like in 2 seconds. Like, I'm just gonna make an assumption. Let's say your program is $2,500. I'm just throwing out a
Sure.
random there. Instead of having it come from my staff's mouth, I'll just say, "Oh, by the way, Sarah will see you now," and or even beforehand during the handout, if you're wondering what, and I'll tell the parent, if you're wondering what the fees at our office, our fees include fees include this amount of services, the lens is all inclusive, and I'll say, and the price is going to be let's say $2,500, or let's say you do a monthly program, it's gonna be $200 a month if you want to do what orthodontists do. Orthodontists quote like a monthly fee, basically.
Yep.
And then that just took me like 10 seconds, you know, and it just the staff. Now some dogs aren't gonna be comfortable about that, but the reason why I do it is not because it's not even to help the patient. It's just to help my staff. My staff they're like, thank you, like thank you. Like you just saved me a bunch, and I also saved them about kicking the mom out. I told the mom stay away, you know, and I quote the price, and it just makes your staff happier. You smooth it all out for them. It only took you less than 20 seconds. So I advise you help your staff out and do that too. But that's kind of controversial. A lot of doctors are really bad about that type of conversation. So if you're not good about conversation, uncomfortable, just stay away from it. But in my opinion, the doctor that's very confident in what they do, they value their services. They're gonna, you know, you're gonna say it, and you're gonna feel really confident about it, and everyone wins.
Yeah, no, I mean, you work for that money. I mean, there's a lot of care that goes involved in managing myopia. So you work for that. You've earned that money. So don't feel bad about asking for it. Um, so when you bring up the cost of myopia management, like, are you out of the room when they decide to go forward with the program? Are they confirming their like essentially like getting on board with the program with the staff, with your team, or like how does that work? Like who's there at the end to actually like get the papers signed and go forward with the actual fitting?
Yes. So after I've done all the clinical testing, I pull away the phoropter and I say, okay, hey, let me tell you what I found. And I tell them what I found. And then we have a little chat in terms of what might work out for little Johnny. And then afterwards, I'll ping the staff on my computer to walk into the room, the myopia counselor. And then they'll walk into the room. And then I'll say, hey, by the way, I'll tell the parent, this is what we're going to do in front of the myopia counselor. This is what I recommend. Let's see little Johnny back in 2 weeks. And then, Rachel's here. She's going to go over some details in terms of, how you can pay and the schedule. And then I exit. And so then they have the conversation without me.
Yep.
But then it happens in the exam room. I recommend doing the handoff in the exam room. There's a lot of psychology behind that as well. We've split test this 1,000 times, and we find that for whatever reason, the acceptance rate of your treatment plan works out better when you do the handoff in the exam room than when you're doing it in the retail area of your office, for instance. And so we do it in the exam room.
Okay. So now, like, let's assume that the parents have decided to go forward with a myopia management fitting, specifically for orthokeratology. Do you pre-schedule like your first, like the INR and dispensing appointment, your first morning follow-ups? Do you pre-schedule all of those?
Yes, we do. When we first opened, we weren't that busy. So I opened cold. And so like I got like one patient a day. So I'm like, come in whenever, But then now we've got so busy that if we don't schedule it, then it's, if we want to see them back, so we do a 1-day follow-up and a 1-week follow-up. If we don't schedule that now, then if they come in that day, there's no appointments tomorrow.
Right.
And so yeah, we schedule them all out. So we give them a dispense appointment where we put the lens on, we check the fitting, check fluorescein patterns, do an oral refraction of the lens, right? Then we have the insertion removal training, and then we do a 1-day follow-up.
Okay. And then with the insertion and removal training and like basically that first appointment where you're doing like the initial check and the dispense, how long do you plan for those patients to be in your office?
Yes. So your fit check and oral refraction should take you like 5 minutes or less. Mm-hmm. So that day is mostly with the staff. And so we book 45 minutes for the contact lens training right now with the technician. Some finish sooner, some finish a lot later. But a few things that we do to smooth along is that first off, for the insertion part of it, which my staff does, not me, they insert the lenses and put the fluorescein for me, and I just check the pattern. But they also proparacaine first. Mm-hmm. Highly recommend proparacaine all your dispenses. So take that tip home if anyone's a new fitter. Proparacaine your kids. Trust me, it works out better for the initial dispense. Then we also have them take out the lens with a plunger. You can teach them the lid method later. Have them come back for that. Yeah. But just for the first day, plunger all the way, 10,000 times easier. And then it goes pretty well, I'd say, with the plunger, and then the hard part is the insertion part, but the lenses are smaller than the scleral lens, so they do quite well.
Yeah. So with the first, like that first morning follow-up, I want to talk a little bit about like the timing on that. Do you have like a specific time frame that you're trying to get these kids back in the morning?
Yeah, so I've talked to other people and they used to say, I want the kid back in the morning and they want the lenses on, all this stuff. We found that doesn't matter. Because like the one day, like how often are you changing the lens after the one day?
You're not.
Never, right?
And as a contact lens manufacturer, we highly discourage, like unless something was like super, super off, we highly discourage making any changes until basically like that 2-week mark.
Exactly. Exactly. So you
Yeah.
know this too from the Euclid side of it. Like
Yeah.
the doctor that's trying to tell you, hey, I found something the one day. You already know that person's probably a novice fitter.
Yeah.
So essentially at the 1 day follow-up, you don't change almost anything. That day is more like a hand-holding event. Make sure they got the lens in. Sometimes the lens did slide around.
Yep.
It's kind of hand holding. It's kind of a fun day too, because guess what? They were 2,400 on yesterday. Now they're 2,040. So it's a fun practice builder, and everyone's high fiving each other anyways. And so it's mostly for that reason. But yeah, honestly the topography doesn't matter. The forcing pattern doesn't matter at the 1 day follow up in a way, because you're not going to change anything unless you're causing harm to the patient. There's a really bad SPK, but that should be rare.
Yep. And let's talk a little bit about SPK. Are you comfortable seeing a little bit of SPK on your first morning follow-ups?
Yeah. So I mean, we don't get it very often actually, the 1 day follow-up. Very rare. So when I do see it, it does raise some red flags. I might not, if I'm going to see the patient back just in a week anyways, if it's just a tiny amount, like trace amounts, I'll just watch it and monitor, because sometimes it self-resolves. And it's not going to be a thing that happens often. But if there's a large amount of central SPK, I'm thinking the lens might be too flat. If there's a lot of peripheral, mid-peripheral corneal SPK, I think the lens might be too tight. And so it's definitely something to mark, and it helps me. That's why I want to see them at the 1 day follow-up to catch those things earlier.
Yep.
In case, for the rare time it's happened, which it has happened, maybe one in the last 200 cases where I did see a decent amount of central SPK. I did refit in that time, but it's extremely rare.
Yep. Yep. And then let's talk about like expectations for that first morning and like visual acuity. So obviously we expect to see some improvement. Chances are your child is not going to be 20/20. So, are you providing any interim glasses or contacts, or are you finding that most of the time the kids are, 20/40 happy, and like, even though it's not perfect, they're still like happy to just go about their day, even being slightly blurry?
Yeah, this is what we do. We used to give them like soft day disposables, but then we had to do like a soft contact lens training too.
Yeah.
It's like, no, let's not do that. So what we did was, first of all, most kids don't even care that much.
Yeah.
But either they can have, of course, they can use their habitual lens, but then they might be over minus. So what we did is we edged a few lenses that are off. We have a -2, -3, -4, -5 loaner glasses. We just had a bunch of them on the edge for really cheap in these, in cheap frames. Just this loaner glass. We give them, they're supposed to give it back to us in the next week or two. We have like 40 or 50 little pair of those. Right now, I looked through the drawer. We had like 40 or 50 of them. There's like 3 left right now. I've got so many kids that have them. Some of them we need to have them, bring them back. They've kept them too long. But anyways, it's been huge for us to not have to give these soft contact lenses to get them by for that day or two.
Yeah.
I highly recommend having some loaner pairs of glasses.
Okay. And then like, when are you doing additional topography scans? And A scans? Do you do a new baseline A scan after the child is established in orthokeratology, or do you just do the next one at like the 1 month mark? When do you take new A scans?
Yeah, good question. So topography, to answer your first question, we take it every follow-up period.
Okay.
Based on the orthokeratology patient. Not for atropine or soft multifocal. We don't take topographies again because I think nothing changed.
Yeah.
But for orthokeratology, essentially every visit. But then for the axial length, usually every 3 months is a good general rule of thumb, is what we do. Because taking it every month is just a little excessive if you're not going to change things, and you want to kind of build more data. So a 3-month cadence is pretty good. Depends on the age of the child, of course. If they're someone who's 16, 17, 18 years old, less often. If there's someone who's 6 years old, more often. So it depends again on risk factors like that.
Yeah. And so you're doing the first morning follow-up, you do a first week follow-up. I'm assuming you're doing one at 1 month.
Yep, correct.
And then what does your follow-up schedule look like after that?
Yeah, every 3 to 6 months, depending
Okay.
on how things are going. If things are going well, and their child is a little bit older, let's say they're 14 years old versus 6 years old, I might say the 14-year-old, I'll see you back in 6 months. And then after a while, every 6 months is at the most. Sometimes it could be a year later if they've been in my lens for the last like 7 years and we haven't changed very much. Then I might just see them dispense and see them in a year sometimes if they're older, right?
Yeah.
Now for the young patients, usually most of the time, I say the majority of the patients we're seeing every 3 to 6 months, most of the time
Yep.
in 3 months
Yep.
to measure axial length.
Yeah. And then, so like, let's switch gears here for a minute because we've primarily focused on orthokeratology, but kids come in a variety of shapes and sizes, and we can't really have like a one size fits all approach to myopia management. So you're probably going to have some additional tools in the toolbox, including some soft multifocal lenses, potentially like using like a hybrid lens. Would you still take topography and A scans for those patients, even if you are doing a soft lens?
Yeah, so not topographies, but yeah, definitely axial length for sure. And about 15% of our patients are on a combination treatment as well. And so they're in soft multifocals or they're in orthokeratology, and then we have to add atropine on top of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we do.
And does your follow-up schedule look any different? I mean, you're probably not doing like a first, I mean, maybe you are. Do you do a first morning follow-up for those patients, or do you tend to go straight to like a 1 week follow-up? What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so for now that we don't do a 1 day follow-up for any of those because nothing changes after 1 day. So atropine, for instance, I'm checking for more side effects. I'm checking for mydriasis. I'm checking for any accommodative issues, neuroblur, light sensitivity like that, pupil size. And so usually I'll see them a week or two after they started the medication just to check for side effects. Luckily, we haven't had any issues yet. For the soft multifocals, I usually see them, give them the lenses, maybe I see them a couple weeks later. And from then on, at the cadence in which I need to measure axial length. So if I don't think I need to measure axial length very often, see you in 6 months. If I think I need to see it more often, then see you in 3 months. But usually the soft kind lens, I'm not going to change very much unless they are progressing quickly.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Mai, I have a feeling you and I could continue to talk for hours, but we've actually gone over our 45-minute time period. So I think we have to roll the questions now. But seriously, thank you so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate all your time tonight.
My pleasure. Yeah. Anyone that has any questions, they can certainly send me an email, ton.mai@treehouseeyes.com. And yeah, I've heard it all from every parent 1,000 different ways, and so has Christie.
Yeah.
So if you run into any weird situations, you can always feel free to email me. I'm happy to help you out. And one of my major missions in life is to help, because I'm a high myope. For those who don't know, I'm a 9 diopter myope, and my eyes are quite large, 27 millimeter axial length or so. And so it's personal to me in terms of that's even why I became an optometrist. And so anything I can do to help other doctors treat more kids, that's the main mission, that one of my main personal missions. And so we need more doctors doing the work. Right now, less than 4% of kids get any type of myopia management. So hoping to make that number much higher.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and go to questions.
Welcome back, Dr. Mai.
Hello. Yes.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
It looks like you've had a busy week since I saw you at Global Specialty Lens Symposium.
Yeah. Just traveling and yeah, working hard. You too.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and roll to questions here. And we've got quite a few. So the first one for Dr. Mai, have you seen any uveitis related to orthokeratology?
Luckily, not yet. But I think if the patient would have already, bad corneal infection, which is, I have not seen that yet. Certainly could happen, but has not been an issue for us.
Yeah, and you've probably done like many, many more cases than I have over the years, but I have not seen any terrible infections related to orthokeratology either. So it does have a relatively great track record for safety. And if you would like any white papers or research on that, again, feel free to reach out and email me. I can have my clinical and scientific affairs department send you some of those white papers so you can look at those.
Yeah, in case No, just some of those patients will ask you as well what the risk factors are. I think, five to 10 out of every 10,000 cases might get, an eye infection or so. Those are some of the numbers. Mark Bullimore has a lot of good studies on this as well.
Yep. So we have another question about, I missed the first webinar. If I go back and watch the YouTube video, would I be eligible for the 50% off promotion? Absolutely. And then we have another question about your training for your staff. Are you using any online training or resources? We have a lot of questions about that, like just kind of like what your process is for specifically the staff training, what you thought was most important in terms of like those initial skill sets to teach the team.
Yeah, great question. At Treehouse Eyes, we have a online training program called Treehouse Eyes University, and our staff and even our doctors will go through the university and do the training. But they will also set a time as well to work one-on-one with a kind of a coach at Treehouse Eyes, and they'll kind of guide them and teach them how to talk about the contracts, how to talk about pricing, as well as what we do in-house to train them on some of the clinical tools. But that's been our approach, and it's been very helpful for us because sometimes we don't have time to train properly because we're just so busy, and so getting someone to help us has been really, really good for our practice.
Yes, I've heard really great things about the Treehouse Eyes like staff training program. I met with some team members in Indianapolis, and I was impressed by their level of knowledge and just their involvement in the overall process. It was amazing, and she had told me that she hadn't even really been in the industry that long. It was mostly just like, yeah, I just got started, and I've just been doing this for a short period of time, and I was like, wow, this is really impressive. So it's a very comprehensive program from the sounds of it. So does ophthalmology in your area believe in myopia management? The two practices in my area don't. Do you have any suggestions on how I can convince them?
Yeah, wow. I mean, we all are in the same boat on this one, right? It's it's an uphill battle. I'd say usually my experience has been fairly similar. I'd say the ones that are more up to date on the research and pediatric ophthalmology is turning around. So I met with a ophthalmologist a couple weeks ago, and he was saying how all the new residents coming out of pediatric ophthalmology programs, they're basically on board with myopia management. And so you won't get a lot of pushback there. We have one pediatric ophthalmologist referring us, orthokeratology, which is amazing. But for the most part, the majority of them are pretty much against it, that have been in practicing for a while. And my just personal experience has been recommending orthokeratology is usually frowned upon by them, and they are more on board with atropine. And so if I'm getting a referral from an ophthalmologist, not that I will alter my treatment recommendation completely, but I tend to sometimes lean more towards atropine if I know that I'm going to co-manage this patient with them.
Yeah, and I would just say that there's a lot of old mindsets out there too, a lot of misconceptions about myopia management specifically related to orthokeratology. I know that even when I was getting things set up at my old practice, I even had some optometrists that were, my age even, that still had some of those like really old beliefs that, like the myopia was just going to rebound as soon as they stopped, the lenses, and it really wasn't doing any long-term good. And I had to really sit down and explain to them the mechanisms of how it actually worked. And yes, if you discontinue the lenses, the myopia that existed previously is going to come back, but there isn't that rebound effect of like, you've saved all of that progression up until the point of discontinuing the lens. So, that there is like definite benefits to it, and that there's, basically 20 plus years of really good research and evidence that suggests that it's highly effective. But it is an uphill battle for some of our colleagues to wrap their head around. So that is something that I've experienced as well.
Yeah, and I agree. I hear this from parents as well. I might have heard from my ophthalmologist not to do it. And a good approach is not to disagree right away. No, don't say no, it's wrong. Don't be defensive about it. I kind of take a soft approach and say, I've heard that myself, and I might have thought that way too if I was in their shoes. But luckily, more recently, there's just been so much more research about it, and we've been doing it so long here. We've got such great success with it that we highly recommend them doing myopia management.
Yeah. So next question is, would you start myopia management for a first-time glasses wearer who's not yet shown progression?
Good question. So no history of progression, but I would say it depends on a number of risk factors. So progression is one risk factor, but there's other risk factors as well. There's age, family history, environmental factors, and current level of refraction. So if they have an overwhelming amount of other risk factors besides just progression, then yes, I would consider starting.
Yep, and I would agree too. I think sometimes I'll look at the age and the amount of myopia that's already present. So, if I've got somebody who's relatively young and they're already presenting as, like A-1 myope, the track record there is more often likely than not that there's going to be progression. I'm just going to start that as early as possible because the evidence shows that the earlier you address progression, the better and more effective our treatments are. So I would definitely consider that. Somebody would like to know what axial length measuring devices we're using. They say, it's expensive and, most of them only do that one job of measuring axial length. And there's questions if there's any way to hack their OCT to get this measurement because they feel like they should be able to get that.
Yeah, good question. I mean, maybe there's a way to hack your OCT, but that's beyond my realm of expertise. I use an IOL master. I bought it
Yep.
used for $9,000. So it was fairly reasonable. I think most devices are now about 20 though for, brand new device. And so, yeah, you have to think about if you're gonna, do it or not. If you're not gonna do and you dabble, then yeah, I might just refer that out, and that's fine. You don't have to do everything. But if you're going to do myopia management, you should measure axial length.
Yeah, and same thing. My practice is also using an IOL master. I think it was a 500. And again, we got ours used, and I think we invested right around 6,500 for it. So all things considered, we thought that was a good investment.
Agreed.
So somebody would like to know, when you started fitting Ortho-K, what were your favorite resources?
Yeah, so I started fitting lenses over a decade ago, and went by really fast. And I'd say first was just having a mentor. Number one, like there are conferences, but the conferences, in my experience, sometimes we'll spend 3 days just to talk about like a couple of things they could have given me in a one pager. And and so I've learned much more just talking to a mentor and going over cases and troubleshooting it with a consultation at Euclid, for instance, and just learning one at a time. But really having a mentor, someone that's seen a bunch of cases and can help you guide you through it. Because I didn't get very much in school. Unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of cases, and so it was really my mentor that helped me to learn.
Yeah. And again, I think that's like how I learned too. I actually Rochelle was my mentor. She was a fellow of the Contact Lens Society and had been doing Ortho-K for many years before I came to work with her. And so all of my first cases, she kind of held my hand through it and was just an excellent resource for like things like troubleshooting. And now I rely heavily on things like you said, like consultation. Now I know how to speak to the lens and like what I'm seeing, and consultation's done a really great job of helping me through some of those adjustments. They're actually really polite about it too, where I'm like, my gut tells me I should do this. And they're like, yeah, you could do it that way, or you could. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably better.
Yeah. So that consultant is better than any almost doctor mentor too. So
yeah,
consultants at Euclid are world class. They're not only extremely knowledgeable, but they're very good mentors and they're good teachers. So they'll talk to you about the topography and the reason why they decided to flatten the lens 5 microns. Yeah. And you will learn from that. It's great help, and so you don't have to do this by yourself.
Yep. I picked up some of my best pearls and time-saving things actually from consultation. It's been very helpful. So someone would like to know, you mentioned that your practice is heavily referral based. They would like to know how you drove those relationships.
Yeah, the number one way was for us, especially my scleral lens practice as well, just meeting doctors, taking them out to lunch, dropping by their office, and just introducing myself, hosting a lot of continuing education and hosting dinner events and networking. And so that's the number one way. Just don't stay inside the 4 walls of your office. Get out there and meet the people in the community. way. No one could beat you in terms of just showing up and meeting people.
Yeah, that's great. I had a slightly different way of doing things at Park. Is we were in kind of a unique situation where we're multidisciplinary. So I mean, we have like all methods of healthcare actually in the same building, and so we actually had pediatricians in our building. And so whenever I pulled up my patient's chart, I had access to like all of their pediatricians' information as well. And so I was like, well, I should start sending them notes that, hey, like when they're doing their next well child visit, things are going to be a little different. This child's probably not wearing glasses. And so I started sending those notes. And then I was like, well, I should be doing this for my outside patients too. And so I just, anytime I had a child that came in for any sort of myopia management, it didn't matter whether it was orthokeratology or a soft multifocal lens or some combination therapy involving atropine, I'd collect the pediatrician's information and send it out as just kind of like a managed care letter. And I actually picked up a couple of like local clinics that weren't affiliated with our practice at all, that were just like a direct stream of children directly into the practice that were being referred specifically for myopia management. Because oftentimes these doctors, when they're doing the well child visits, they're actually doing either an autorefraction or some sort of like essentially it's an autorefraction even on their phones. Like they know these children are myopic before they ever leave the office. So it was a really great way to kind of nudge them into, hey, we're doing this thing, it's called myopia management. You've never heard of it before, but here's a little brochure and my business card if you have any questions. And it was like really non-aggressive to just, like after they'd gotten a few, they were starting to pay a little more attention. So we've been reasonably successful with that too.
Agreed. Yeah, and then one thing, writing those letters and sending them out is also good for your medical practice too.
Yeah.
So that's really smart. And one thing that I got lucky with was that we don't have sometimes time to organize all these events and do all these things. And so we hired Trios Eyes, and they helped to set up these dinner meetings for us and create the CEs for us. And then the doctors show up to the meetings, and I just present about what I know about myopia. And there's no sell. I just teach them about how to do myopia management, and then they realize that maybe he's someone I can work with, and then maybe we should refer patients to him because he might be, he'll work well with us together. So that's been big for us.
Yeah. And actually, in relation to Treehouse, one of our panelists wants to know: is there a upfront fee for Treehouse, or is it a percentage of the income?
Yeah, there's I don't know all the exact details because they've changed things, but there's a hybrid model where there's some people on a flat fee, and there's some people that pay a flat fee plus a little percentage. And so if you're getting started, it's pretty low. But I would certainly ask, you can send me an email and I can connect you with the Trios Eyes person because I don't handle that. And
Sure.
They can show you all of that as well.
Yep. And then we have a doctor that would like to know what your follow-up price schedule is for the following years. So when it comes to orthokeratology, do you discount into years 2 and beyond, or is it the same fee across the board year after year?
Great question. And I would do the math based on chair time. So I'll just make up some numbers here. Let's say your primary care practice makes $500 an hour. Let's say you see 2 patients an hour, you make $250 each, that's $500. And let's say a myopia case takes 4 hours the first year, including the consultation, all the follow-up visits, everything. It takes you 3 to 4 hours, let's say year 1, because of all the follow-ups in the training. And so that's 4 hours, right? So to match what you do in primary care, if it's $500 per hour, and this is 4 hours, you need to charge at least, let's say $2,000, let's say year 1. I'm just making up numbers. And so the good news is that's just year 1 though. The subsequent years, your chair time would be much less. You shouldn't be spending 4 hours in year 2 because things would be pretty settled. And so if you're just going to spend, let's say 1/4 of the time, most prices that I talk to would charge 1/4 as much, for instance. And so of course those numbers are, it's a wide range depending where you are, but usually what I see is the subsequent years are, 1/3 to 1/4 of the first year.
Yeah. So when somebody comes back for a myopia consult after having purchased maybe a pair of glasses in your dispensary, do they ever question or push back onto why they just bought and paid for glasses and then pay for orthokeratology and not need the glasses?
Yeah. Luckily, no, because of my education. I say every patient with contact lenses, whether they're in orthokeratology, whether they're in soft multifocals, needs glasses. Because you and I, Christie, we've seen enough patients where
they went on a camping trip, and if
Yep.
they have glasses that are 7 years old because they never updated them, they're in trouble, right? So
Yep.
be patient these glasses.
Yeah, and inherently kids are germy. They're at some point in time over the course of their I mean, I don't know what your average is, but I'm going to assume that most of the children are wearing these lenses for probably 3 to 5 years. At some point in time, they're going to probably have a conjunctivitis that is going to take them out of contact lenses for a couple of days. And so the need to have a pair of current backup glasses, I think, is really strong. That said, I think, like this never happened to me, but I think if this did happen to me at my old practice, kids still need ultraviolet protection. And especially if we're taking them out of their polycarbonate glasses and putting them into the orthokeratology lenses where they're losing that ultraviolet, I would probably just take those lenses out and make them a pair of non-prescription full spectrum UV blocking sunglasses, just again, so they feel like they had the value. It's going to cost me next to nothing to do that, just to make certain that everybody was satisfied. But again, backup glasses are still important.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So question, do you get any referrals from retail chains? Like my eye doctor is really big around here, but I haven't received any referrals. Do you have any advice as to how to drive those?
Yeah, I might start with those actually first over private practices, because these corporate doctors, they're just in a rush, unfortunately, and sometimes they don't have time to educate patients about myopia, and they feel that they should, right? And so they're great resources. I would definitely approach them, take them out to lunch, and so people refer to their friends. And so once you become friends and just meet people in the local area, I'm involved in my local optometric society. I'm a past president. I'm on the board. I do a lot of work with the local community. And so everyone kind of knows me at this point. And so that's been a big way of me just getting to meet people, just attending local society meetings. I'm in Vision Source. We have dinner meetings that happen every month as well. And so I'll meet doctors there. We become friends, and that's really what it takes. But yeah, big friends with the local doctors, especially in the corporate areas as well. And then you'll get referrals from them.
Yeah, and I would echo that there's probably a lot of corporate optometrists that are big believers in myopia management, but they probably lack things like a corneal topographer or an axial length way of measuring that, whether that's biometry or some sort of like IOL mask or something like that. They just don't have the tools necessary to do that. So making friends with those and developing that great relationship can be a really great source of referrals for you. Can you give me some info on how to get started fitting orthokeratology? So from the Euclid standpoint, to get started, the first thing would be to take our certification course. It's not going to take long. It's available on the website, and we do have a link for it in the chat box. And basically, it's going to walk you through the very basics of how to fit orthokeratology and a little bit on troubleshooting. Once you're certified, we can set up like a one-on-one meeting to really go over some of the finer aspects of either fitting, staff training, answering any questions. If you want to discuss things like pricing strategy or like how you're going to integrate that into the rest of your practice, I'm happy to help. And then Dr. Mai, do you have any like pearls on getting started? Any things that you wish you knew when you first were getting yourself set up?
Yeah, I would say just calling Euclid and just getting started. Start with case number 1. Make sure you have a topographer. Don't fit orthokeratology if you don't have a corneal topographer, and just take it one at a time. And the people at Euclid will hold your hand and walk you through it. They're very, very friendly and easy to work with, and so that's what I would do.
Do you fit empirically or do you fit with a diagnostic fitting?
Yeah, good question. So I fit exclusively empirically. I find that it makes my consultation much quicker, faster, and the first lens is really good when I fit empirically as well. And only minor modifications are needed later on. So yeah, I don't do a fit set, and I don't recommend fit set because it streamlines your consultation without having to do it.
100%. I started with a different brand before I started using Euclid. For those of you who are listening, Euclid is solely an empirically fit lens. But prior to switching to Euclid lenses, I had been using a competitor's product that was primarily fit set driven. And I really enjoyed when I switched over, not having to clean the lenses. I thought that was excellent, not having to do the dishes after a fitting. But the other thing too is that I like the impression that an empirically based lens fit gave my patient. Like, this is a lens that, you know, based off my corneal topography, I've made especially for you. It really had that like high tech feeling to it versus the trial and error of a fit set where you put one on and you're like, no, it's not quite right. And then maybe you try one or two other lenses before you settle on the one that you finally end up, you know, over refracting and then ordering. So I really like the impression that the empirically fit lenses gave to my patients.
Yeah, and also like I think almost every past president of the American Optometric Myopia Control Society and a lot of other doctors I know are fitting a lot of orthokeratology. Almost all of them, probably at least 9 out of 10, are doing empirical fit now. So
Yeah.
I also used to do diagnostic fitting as well. So we kind of both have evolved at the same time, Christie.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great. And I know Euclid, we have 87% first fit success on our lenses. So really, I think it's just, again, it's more efficient. It's time efficient. It saves you time. And again, that first impression that you're making on your patient, I feel like there's a lot of upsides to it.
Mm-hmm.
So do you do an A scan on all of your kids with a yearly visit to monitor for progression, even if they are not a myopia management patient?
Yeah, we do. So we measure axial length on any kid who's less than 18 years old, just as part of a routine comprehensive eye exam at this point.
And then how do you approach the conversation with parents when you're discussing the three main treatment options, specifically the cost differences?
Yeah, our motto is that, and this is, you know, everyone has a different philosophy, but I've adopted the philosophy that it's like going to the orthodontist, and it's not about the rubber bands and the brackets. It's about getting straight teeth. Similarly with this, it's about getting myopia management, and what we do doesn't change the pricing. We can sometimes switch in and out of one and the other. We might start with one and move into the other. It doesn't matter, whatever works. Doing this long enough, I know that, you know, everything I said is true, but at the same time, mom sometimes just decides. And in my experience is that, you know, I don't let perfect be the enemy of good. If the mom demands atropine, you know, we'll get myopia management from atropine. If the mom demands orthokeratology, we'll get some success there as well. And I'm happy if they're on something, they're better than 95% of other children out there anyways.
Yeah. And so I think this is going to be our last question because we've actually gone over on our time, but do you charge for a return follow-up visit or are you using a global fee? And then there's a second part to this question is, do you have any stats on refractive error of successful people such as athletes or celebrities? Because I could see that having a significant influence on many parents or patients and getting them to commit to a treatment.
Yeah, we have, I'm lucky in that I'm in Southern California. There's like Disneyland nearby, things like that. So we have like, some of the movies, I think it was like, we've got some patients who were in big Disney movies like Raya, the Last Dragon one, and some of the the Disney Frozen movies. Like there's some of those patients have come to our office, but as far as what was the other question? It was
if you were charging for a like follow-up visit.
Yes, so we do, and this is what most doctors that I've seen that have success do, is they usually charge a global fee that includes, that would cover the whole year or even 2 years if you want, versus charging for every follow-up visit. So, because then it gets a little bit just too much. So that's been my experience, and those are the doctors that have the most success. A global.
Yeah, and again, I 100% agree with you. That's how we've had the best success too. One other question just popped in, and I'm going to go ahead and ask you this one because it's a good question. What axial length do you feel is a good baseline to start treatment at?
Yeah, loaded question. It depends.
I know, right?
But, a full-grown adult should be like 23 millimeters or so, depending on the study you read. And so if they're already beyond 23 millimeters, if they're like 25, 26, irrespective of the refractive error, I might consider someone that has a 25 millimeter eyeball axial length a myope, even if they're plano.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, so again, just take this home. Refractive error, axial length, age, family history, environmental lifestyle. Those are all risk factors, and one doesn't necessarily determine what you do, but a combination of them certainly can.
All right. Oh, I think that's great advice. And just knowing that, even at the end, that age is not necessarily a protective risk factor against future progression too. So really great advice. Thanks everybody for listening tonight. Thank you, Dr. Mai, for joining us and for being part of our panel. Our next discussion is going to happen on the 15th, and we've got a link in the chat box if you guys want to go ahead and jump on that if you haven't already registered. We'll look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.